1999, Morpheus offered Neo a choice between a red pill and a blue pill. In 2018, this country fractured between red and blue. In 2022, I'm here to tell you that if you really want the truth, more voters are neither red or blue. Yet, they have no representation, no choice, and no options. They have to choose between candidates chosen by the red people or the blue people. I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress as an American, as in red, white, and blue. I'm a veteran, an activist, and a small businessman. I'm asking you to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. In Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. The next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Hi, I'm David Esrati. I'm running for Congress. Unlike my opposition, 9-term Republican Mike Turner, I actually want to talk to you, and this is how I'm going to do it. Even once I get in Congress, every day I'm going to try at the end of the day tell you what I did in Congress, what happened, and get your feedback. So we have some rules about how to discuss things. You can drop notes in the comments. Don't do more than 3 in a row. Let somebody else get in there. You can attack me, but that's not going to do you a whole lot of good. Don't attack other viewers. And we're going to talk about wealth, the wealth gap, payroll, taxes, the whole 9 yards, getting down to even how we fix all this. But the reality is most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. We've seen more and more people go homeless, food insecurity. We've got children who aren't getting fed, and there's a problem. And all of us have played Monopoly. And we know what happens when somebody owns all the properties on the board. The game's over. And that's what we're heading to in this country because we've allowed the rich to buy the laws that they want. And they've basically Congress has folded, bent over and said, here, because they need their money. My opponent, we've identified now 20 billionaires who've given him money. Billionaires, that's with a B. Now, you know, people just don't seem to understand what a billion is. And really, once you make more than, you know, 100 million, you're never going to want for anything again. The compound interest on that is insane. But a long time ago, I remember when they decided to pay Chuck Exley at NCR $7.2 million a year, and I worked it out how much that was hourly. And he was pulling in like $4,000 an hour. $4,000 an hour. Let that sink in. Let's just go with $1 million, for example, for $1 million a year to get paid that. And there are lots of people making $1 million a year, running companies, running not for profits, like our hospitals. That's an hourly pay of $480.77. That means your weekly pay is $20,000. Your monthly pay is $83,000. I'm sorry, that's 1,854% of the U.S. median salary. And the median salary is where you knock off the highs and the lows and basically average it out. And it's pretty insane. In fact, there was a story in the Ohio Capital Journal talking about Ohio companies and the pay gap, the wealth gap, the pay ratio, and the CEO of Procter & Gamble's making almost $24 million a year. His median employee makes $70,000, which is decent money, $70,000 a year. But it's 343 times that to equal what he makes. And he's not the founder. He's not Mr. Procter. He's not Mr. Gamble. We really need to figure out how much somebody's worth, because once you get to $20 million a year, which is what he's making, that's $9,615 an hour. I'm going to repeat that, $9,615 an hour. That's a weekly pay of $384,615 and a monthly pay of $1,006,000. You are at 37,000% of the U.S. median salary at $20 million a year. And here on this list, we got Procter & Gamble, Trans Design, Marathon Petroleum, all those guys making over 20. And if we go to making over, say, 17, we've got Parker Hannifin, Bath & Body Works, and Kroger. And if you drop down to 15, it's Sherwin-Williams and American Electric Power. These people are making a fortune. So it's time for some ice cream economists. There are these two guys, Ben and Jerry. They had some premium ice cream in Vermont. They started out in an old gas station, and they started mixing in chunky things, and they came up with chocolate chip cookie dough, and next thing you know, they're doing quite well. And they had a lot of growth pains and a lot of trouble. But one of the things they committed to is making money for the people who worked for them. One of their fringe benefits was every day you come into work, you get to take a pint home. Now, I know that sounds really good to a lot of you, but you can't eat a whole pint every day. And even though they have all those flavors, it starts getting old. But the reality is these guys said, we're not going to make more than 7 times what our employees make. We're going to cap it out at that. And then there are companies that are employee stock-owned companies where they share the money with the workers, the people who make the money. That's not what's happening in this country now. When you got people like Jeff Bezos saying, oh, I'm paying everybody $15 an hour and I'm better than all, these other people, and that's not even the minimum, it means that his full-time Amazon employees are making $31,200 a year. $31,000 a year. So it would take 4.15 million years to have earned as much as their boss. That's insane. He's not getting there by himself. Now I see a question. What is your take on the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022? Do you think we should do more when we expand both majorities in the House and Senate? Well, expanding majorities in the House is predicted not to happen, and majorities in the Senate is not to happen. Right now we're split 50-50, and since you got Manchin and Sinema, we don't even have that. But I'm I really haven't read enough about the Inflation Reduction Act, but what I can tell you is in Great Britain, to respond to the price gouging we've seen by the major oil companies, which rolls through everything because you use oil to transport everything in this country. Britain, in no time, instituted what's called a windfall profits tax, and they took 25% off of the profits of these companies. When you see these stock buybacks, let's really examine what a stock buyback is, because I don't think people quite understand how screwed up this is. First off, when we talk about stock, it's held by the rich in this country. It's not held by you and me and the average Joe. Very few Americans own stock directly. How they may have stock is through a pension plan, through an IRA or something else funded by their employers, or if they work for large companies, they might have it through their employee benefits, a pension plan that's being bought. And so they may own stock through that, usually through large mutual funds. But in terms of individuals having any control over their investment in the company, that's only for really rich people. So that's number one problem. Number two problem here, okay, and this part's the part that's crazy. I own a business. I need capital to grow my business. Somebody thinks it's a good idea and wants to invest. I give up, if I'm selling stock, I give up equity. That's ownership in the company to that person. And you would assume they're making it enough of an investment to take a serious portion of the company. Let's say I give them 49%, just to keep it simple. So I own 51, they own 49. They've given me a couple $1 million. What do they expect back from that? They don't have a controlling interest in the company, but they expect what's called a dividend. They expect return on investment. They want to make their money back plus interest more than what they get in a bank. They're expecting a return. That is usually paid out in dividends. Well, dividends went out of style a while ago. So what they might do is a stock split or create different classes of stock, or they start buying back stock with a company, or they award more stock to people, etc., etc. Long term, what you're supposed to get is dividends. That means at the end of the year, when there are profits, you split it between the owners. 51% is mine, 49% is him. That's that simple. That's where the profit goes. So you can both decide to reinvest in the company, but reinvesting in stock is just taking money of the owners and putting it in somebody's pocket. Now, yeah, their stock will go up, but it's not the same as cash coming out. And this has to do with the way we set up our tax code. At some point or another, America has to stop thinking that income tax is the only way to tax people. There has to be a wealth tax as well. And you shouldn't even call it a tax. This is where Democrats screw up and Republicans score big. You know, the inheritance tax, they call it the death tax. And, you know, people say, oh, but the family farm. Look, you can pass down something like $22 million to your heirs. That's more than enough right now to cover the family farm and then some. But the reality is, there is a cost of being an American. And the ultra-rich don't pay taxes like the rest of us. Partially because we underfund the IRS, and partially because we just have no clue at how big a billion is. Now, I keep seeing comments by Official Little Silver, and I am going to warn you that even if they're positive and stuff, you sort of got to wait until somebody else pipes in. But I'm going to take a moment here to read this. Okay. So one of the things that we have to realize is the Trump tax cuts of, I think it was 2017, basically cut the hell out of everything that went to the wealthy. And only little people pay taxes anymore. You have to be stupid to pay an inheritance tax. You can set up trusts. You can do all kinds of things to get yourself out of trouble. I agree. Our political environment is messed up, and don't delete him. He's got good questions. He's just doing it in small gaps. But yeah, people in Texas, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Greg Abbott is one of these people that's got a lot of backers for some strange reason. And I think there might be a showdown eventually there. We'll see what happens. But let's go back to this whole wealth tax thing and income tax. So I believe in ratios. And here's one of the ratios, like Ben and Jerry did. And I'll go say 20 times your median pay is pretty damn good pay. And we'll go with that. But if you're a company that gets a majority of your money from the taxpayers in the United States, in other words, the government is your primary client, you work for us. You don't work for your shareholders, you work for the government. Especially if you're a hospital, supposedly providing not-for-profit or non-profit health care, and you're saying, well, I treat everybody, so I should be. No, here's the deal. You get your money from Medicare, Medicaid, you get more than 35% of your money from them, there's a cap, and it's less than 20 to 1. It's like 10 to 1. And if you're claiming nonprofit, it's like 5 to 1. Because at some point, the people at the bottom have to be able to afford the things the people at the top take for granted. The split in this country, the divide, the gap, that's when things get dangerous. There's always, once you get far enough apart, there's an implosion, there's a coming back together, and it can be really ugly. Warren Buffett complains that his secretary is taxed at a higher rate than he is. Warren Buffett's one of the smartest men in the world when it comes to investing, and even he's disgusted by it. In fact, he's doing his best to make sure all of his money that he's earned isn't handed down to his heirs, but spent helping others. Now, one of the things is all these nonprofits and donating to them, and also buying politicians has caused a real screw up in the whole system, and it's become profitable to start a nonprofit. It shouldn't be a nonprofit because it's profitable. Okay? It should be a nonprofit because it's doing something that needs to be done that people aren't doing. But, healthcare shouldn't be one of them. Everybody should have healthcare. So, people seem to think this idea of a ratio is somehow wrong. They have this idea that everybody should be paid unlimited amounts, how, where anybody can become a LeBron James if they just work hard enough or have the right genes, or they can become a movie star or a Twitter star or a music star. But the reality is those are few and far between. And let's talk about LeBron James. He doesn't make his money playing in the NBA. He makes his money on endorsements and marketing and sales of products with his name. But what does LeBron do? He invested back in education in Akron, Ohio. He does some other really amazing things. But let's talk about LeBron and his paycheck in the NBA, which is still pretty good, but there's this thing called a salary cap. Why is there a salary cap in the NBA? Well, because one team could do what we did in the beginning example of Monopoly, and they can just buy all the best players and win all the games, and it gets really boring, right? So they have salary caps. It's also to protect the owners who can only welch out so much of the money off of these players' sweat equity, that they're doing out there on the floor. We don't want to make it too hard for the owners of these sports teams, do we now? They get to make the ultimate decisions. But we've managed to try to create some sort of balance in sports. Why aren't we doing it in our own economy? Now, Robert Reich is a very smart economist, and he does a lot of really good videos. I've got a link to one in the comments. And he says all we got to do is tax billionaires, 2% millionaires, people making more than $1 million a year, 2% a year, just 2%, and it'll bring in $400 billion. $400 billion, and it can go to things like healthcare and education. But, we just spent $8 billion out of nowhere for the Ukraine. Put these things in perspective. It's crazy, the numbers and the ratios. We can do a lot of things in America if we put our minds to it. So, how much is it Jeff Bezos worth? How much is Elon Musk worth? How much should these people make? These guys are building spaceships and going into space now. That used to be something only the federal government could afford to do. People say, well, we're wasteful and we do this and that. Trust me, Bezos and Musk wouldn't have been flying spacecraft if they hadn't had us do it first. We spent a lot of money, a lot of social capital on trying to figure those problems out. Now they're making money. Mark, I think it is 2% of their net worth that he is talking about, over $1 million a year. And realistically, a friend of mine who's one of those people in the 1% says, he says, once you've got 100 million, just simple interest, you're making enough, 4 or 5 million a year at ridiculously low interest rates without doing anything. And you could definitely live on that, and which I would agree. Getting back to, at a million a year, that's $19,000, almost $20,000, $19,000 a week. You can live on $19,000 a week. Anyway, so we've got to figure out a new way of structuring all this so that everybody in America doesn't have to live in fear of losing their house, not being able to put food on the table, or wondering about where their next, if they get ill, they're going to have to declare bankruptcy and lose everything. That is not acceptable for the greatest nation on this planet. Apparently it is to Mr. Turner, because he doesn't have a problem with you spending getting price gouged for $1,000 a month for insulin when every other country in the world has it for $25. $25, that's right, $25 or less. You can go to TikTok and you can follow me there, where I just released a video today about Mike Turner voting no on the Insulin Act, the Affordable Insulin Act. So, another way to follow in. I'm really happy to see the people taking time and watching and tuning in. This is a very difficult thing to do, and running for office, a lot of people just won't put themselves out there. I'm sure Turner's millions are going to come and they're going to try to edit these videos any way they want to try to make me look stupid. It's your job to talk to people and tell people and spread the word and share that there is somebody out there who wants to work for you and not for the billionaires. Somebody who cares about making sure our kids are safe in school, that not everybody can own a semi-automatic weapon, that a woman's choice is her own, and that taxes are collected equitably and simply. One of the things I really wanted to do when I got into this, before we had the mass shootings, before we've had the Roe Wade discussion, is I just wanted to stop forcing employers to have to hire a payroll service to pay taxes. That is sort of like a tax on paying taxes. There is no reason the federal government can't simplify payroll tax collection and get the money in real time and have it all crystal clear. It should be really easy, and it shouldn't cost small business a fortune to do it. Because trust me, Amazon isn't paying $8 a month per employee to pay taxes. They don't do it that way. The software shouldn't be charged by the month. It shouldn't, used to be able to buy a software package and you owned it. Now you're paying a subscription and Intuit keeps jacking it up. That doesn't make sense. Accounting doesn't change daily. If we have to, maybe the federal government just needs to buy Intuit. I'd hope they'd buy somebody else's, because Intuit's software really blows. It's a horrible interface, horrible program. We could have a way to make sure that small businesses don't get caught by not paying what they're supposed to or collecting what they're supposed to, and make it easy. It's way too complicated to start a business, and small business still creates more jobs than big business. So, I'm David Esrati. I'm running for Congress. I really appreciate you coming here at 4 o'clock every day or watching the replays. If you got any questions or you want a subject for the next one tomorrow at 4, drop it in the comments. I read all of them. I respond if they're not from a guy who went to the Capitol to bust in on January 6th. Read my blog, Esrati.com. Subscribe to that. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, Elect Esrati. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the notify bell. Or go to my electesrati.com and hit subscribe, /subscribe. Fill in and get the newsletter, which I send out once a week. Yeah, I ask for money, but it's not the kind of newsletter that you get, those emails you get from all the other candidates. I see Mark has another question. Most companies are paying that and more per employee per month. Most larger companies also use some sort of service to do their payroll. Well, Mark, I'm going to save the large companies money too then. And I know Mark knows what he's talking about because he's a CPA. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's come in. We'll be here tomorrow again. The video I posted of last Thursday's Democratic Party meeting shit show is going through the roof. I wouldn't quite call it a breaking the internet, but for an hour-and-a-half video with a near brawl at the end, it's getting a lot of views. So you might want to dial in and watch that. We'll have a shorter version of that soon to explain what happened. And also, I thought I'd have them here today. We're going to have our Ohio Do Something About Guns shirt, and we're also going to have Elections Not Auctions shirt available by Thursday, and we're going to include those to anybody who donates over $100. So get over there and donate and get your first choice of shirt sizes and everything else. But this is a grassroots campaign. This isn't one funded by billionaires. So I really appreciate anything you can give. I am perfectly happy with people just going in and giving $3 or $5 or $7 or $10, or making it a monthly or a weekly, $5, and say, I'm going to help because I don't want our congressman paid for by billionaires. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.